Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of y'all, and peace out to the rest of you. Hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. Here's what's going on so far, y'all. Right now, we're facing a scenario or a situation in which Black Americans are being told to be more xenophobic. This happened in South Africa a little while ago, and we were all very upset with Black South Africans for their xenophobia against other Africans. While they were not jumping on one Greek, Boer, Britisher, or Chinese. And yet they were going around and looking for Mozambicans and Zambians and Zimbabweans and Malawians and Angolans to throw them out. And they were actually welcoming us. And that's largely because we weren't going there to work and we weren't competing in the job market with them. But they were willing to fight other Black folks over bones while whites and Chinese ate the meat. We were rightfully angry, but we were wrongfully upset at most of the Black South Africans, as if most of them were in on the xenophobia. I've talked with some of them and they have said that we do have a problem with exceptionalism, but most of us found that level of xenophobia to be disgusting as hell. And I believed it because that is an extreme, and most of them did find that to be disgusting as hell. Some of them were very angry, but they did not want Black Africans to just be systemically uprooted and thrown out. Some who had been involved in the struggle said that without the help of other African nations, apartheid would still be going on in South Africa. One of the reasons why it is that I have refused sometimes to comment is because I want to hear out both sides and then I say something. I believe that even two of my subscribers are having a debate and they don't hate each other. But neither one is as aware as I am of the counterparts to their opposing arguments. Each opposing argument has somebody from that section or from that nationality or group of nationalities that sees it differently. Most people on the African continent do look at us as being lost, but they don't hate us and they don't want ill towards us. You got one group of one nationality that wishes evil upon even other groups of the same nationality, so they love the division. And with that particular group of one nationality, we don't hardly need white folks or their agents. They're acting like that for free because they just think they're better than everyone else. It's one group of one nationality. They talk so much trash when they're joking as a part of their culture that they insult other people and you think they're serious. This is what we're facing. We're not facing a situation in which Black folk are just really in a bitter argument with each other because we hate each other. That's not the case. In Malaysia, I've seen this. Malaysians are better at looking at us objectively than we are at looking at ourselves, looking at each other. The Malaysians have a problem with one nationality, and if they knew about the specific group in that nationality that was causing the trouble, they would look at them and not the rest of the nationality. They meet people from this nationality with similar names, Muslim names like themselves, Idris, Ahmed, and they don't even know that these are folks from the same nationality. They treat them like brothers until these folks act differently. They're looking at people with names like Izan Chukwu and such names, because those are the names they recognize as being arrested and discovered for doing certain things wrong. Same thing in Thailand. They're taking a better look at objectively looking at us and our diversity and not being overwhelmed by Black diversity than Black folks are at not being overwhelmed by Black diversity. South Africa did have a problem with this idea of exceptionalism, and we African Americans have had a similar idea. Some of that idea has actually been very correct, but we failed to realize that in actuality, many nations have had specific combinations of experiences that have given them information to throw into a common collective that could have helped us instead of us bickering and arguing. We saw that in the Luke Cage series when she started jumping on the Jamaicans. And to a certain extent, she had to do so. But what I did not see in any of that, and in much talk since then, has been talk of how to actually fix the relationship in spite of the lowest elements of both sides. And it's not even both, it's really three. The Black North Americans, the Black Caribbeans, and then the continental Africans. And what's funny about that is that when you start looking at African Latinos, they're not getting caught up in this because they are they are diasporans, and they're actually welcoming of Africans that are welcoming of them. That's the funny thing about it. If they're in the debate at all, if they identify as black at all, then they are. Now, the ones that want to deny being black, that's a different story. Like Godfrey said, some of them are they try to salsa that stuff up. I know Black Poppy, but we're not talking about them. But you know what? They're relevant to this conversation too, because people who deny being black when they're black and those who hate black folks, even if they're not black, they generally have a problem with blackness regardless of nationality. They just use their own nationality to try to say that they are not black. That's all. So what I'm saying is that our enemies are still of a particular mindset. Those who hate us still see it one way, and the way that they see it is that if you are black, we got a problem. That's how I know the Malaysians are not racist. The Malaysians, the Indians and the Chinese, absolutely they are. They're still from India and China as far as that is concerned. They could lose all these other things from their home countries after generations of living in Malaysia. They don't lose that. I don't have to tell you about Indians. They can live in a black country for generations and still have anti-blackness in their culture. Never lose it. That's why Idi Amin got sick and tired of them and kicked him out. And I don't blame him for his anger. Should he have kicked him out? I don't know. You know what? Maybe he should. And this is something I can say with no anger or hatred. In South Africa, Indians that live there after generations can entertain levels and elements of anti-blackness after living generations in a black African country. It doesn't matter what your nationality is. They got problems. They don't mind exploiting our divisions for their own gains, but they got issues. One of the ways I know is that when I met some of them in South Africa, they wanted to make it a clear point to me that I'm not black, I'm colored. Then I met black and colored folks who counted themselves as black, and they said, well, you're African American, that counts as black. Especially since the word colored over there meant black. So in your case, you're not forced to choose or differentiate. But the Indians, they wanted to make it a point that I was not black and I was not supposed to. And they wanted to do it in a ridiculing way, as if to say, oh, they're not going to take you as black. They're going to laugh at you for saying that. Then I speak Zulu to somebody. And he's like, oh, what's happening, bro? How you doing? You came a long way to come home, even though I'm a West African. We do have certain things to debate about to get right. That is very true. A lot of it is misinformation. We just need to clear up. I know this. I've been on both sides of this divide geographically and politically and culturally. Coming from the Gulf Coast, we've had a lot of African customs. I was more aware of this when I got to Atlanta and met them. I remember once when I was in a restaurant after my freshman year, sitting down, and I remember this man saying, asking where I'm from, and when I told him, he said, oh, are you Creole? And at the time I didn't know I was, so I said, I'm not Creole actually, but I understand why you ask. And he said, oh man, it's all the same. I'm Gullah Geechee from South Carolina. We're related. And at the time I was like, well, I mean, we're related in terms of Africa, but I don't really know about anything else. So I really didn't know. I was trying to be objective about it. I really didn't know, but this man was more right than I realized. We were related. We had kept certain things from Africa, and so had they. Even this particular group that goes and causes trouble between other Africans, let alone between continental Africans, let alone between diasporans and continental Africans, or between Caribbeans and Black North Americans. Even this particular group suffered heavily under what the British did. They went through massacres from the British. They have a place in South Carolina, I believe, still named after their people because of the way that they responded to enslavement, preferring to drown. The Dahomey Empire, which was cruel as hell, had gotten its cruelty because they had been a part of the Oyo Empire run by the Yoruba, and they had been really, really downtrodden and oppressed. Monsters have origin stories, and they're still monsters, but they have origin stories. To get to the matter, the heart of this matter, I hung out yesterday with B Deep, the rapper whose video I shared in my community tab. Also a Black Saudi. I found out about him through Mr. Hausawi. B Deep, also called Dark Matter, has been on this pro-black business for years before I knew him, just like Mr. Hausawi is. Now, B Deep, Dark Matter, did not tell Mr. Hausawi that he was rapping. He told me, but didn't tell him, even though I found out about him through Mr. Hausawi. But both of them have been on this pro-black business for a long time. And what I wanted you to understand is that there are many commonalities and similarities that we don't know about, and we're not going to know about them if we start taking on a xenophobic attitude about blackness. It's one thing to have an attitude that we need to get our stuff together. And like I said, in order to understand it, you got to realize that it starts with misinformation, not with arrogance. You got one group that's on that arrogant stuff. One that I can remember that we know of right now. And those who know what I'm talking about, and they know about whom I'm talking, because even neighboring groups to them will say to us, they believe they're better than everybody, and they believe the end justifies the means, and they believe that it is perfectly okay to do certain things to you they would not tolerate being done to them to make money. And those of them who don't do these nefarious things to make money off of others still praise and respect those who do, and that's why their culture is bad. And a lot of us have to understand this. If I took on this divisive attitude, not one of understanding distinctions, because that is a balanced way to approach it. Yes, ADOS are distinct. Jamaicans are distinct even from other Black Caribbean peoples. Even other Anglophone Black Caribbean nationalities, they are distinct. But if I took on the divisive attitude that Yvette Carnell wanted us to take on when she started talking about ADOS as a division, not a distinction, because she knows that non-ADOS Black folks don't play that lifestyle she's living, which is really what that was about. Even if she didn't create the term, her using that as a division was really about nothing other than protecting her lifestyle. Because in the diaspora and in the continent, they say that's nasty, filthy, stank, funky. Get that out our face. That's an abomination. And they still take on that mindset. Good. Because a lot of us, ADOS, aren't taking on the mindset that it is an abomination. We're just saying it's nasty, filthy, stanky, disgusting. Oh, we don't believe in that stuff. Stop trying to legitimize it and stop trying to use our cause and our civil rights efforts to advance the results you want. We're the ones rightfully saying that, and we should be. But we're not treating it like an abomination, whereas they do. And a lot of us fell for this. A lot of us in the Black manosphere who are red pill aware and who are sick of the BS fell into the mistake of getting divisive against the Black folks who had the proper attitude towards that lifestyle. Yeah, I said it. They were right for considering it an abomination and still are. Women laying with women and men laying with men in that romantic sense. Yeah, that's an abomination. Abrahamic and non-Abrahamic peoples alike have seen it that way. So what's wound up taking place here is that I found out on more than one occasion, hanging out with Mr. Hausawi and also hanging out with Dark Matter, that there have been actually quite some similarities in between just black Saudis and black Americans, and we didn't realize it. And they've been looking to us. The ones of them who get over the inferiority complex have been looking to us. And I'm not willing to see us turn and let them down in that regard. Just, there was a time when many of us looked at, we said, well, if we get ourselves free, everybody else goes free too. And that was true. Because we weren't going to do to others what had been done to us. But sadly enough, you know what? You know, a lot of us are not going to learn about this. A lot of us are not going to learn about it for one reason, because what happens if you actually come across a black Saudi? They're not that common, but what happens if you come across them? What happens if you come across some studying in the States? Oh, you ain't ADOS. You ain't one of us. They're going to tell their people, you know what? Black Americans didn't treat me so well because I wasn't American. They were on that xenophobic stuff, but the white folks treated me well. I mean, that's what a lot of us do. We make that mistake when we start getting divisive about being ADOS, not distinctive, and not being willing to correct historical problems and misunderstandings. But when we start getting into the specifically being divisive about ADOS, or not being ADOS for that matter, I'm better than you ADOS. Either one of these, when we start that, one of the things that we all wind up doing is treating white folks better than we treat each other, whether it's the xenophobia in South Africa or the divisiveness of the ADOS or the non-ADOS in the Americas. That's one of the things that we all wind up doing. We start looking at each other, and then white folk just walk around unscathed, even emotionally. And quiet as it's kept, sometimes the only group of people that are willing to even point a finger at white folks will be African Americans. And that's where we're right. And yes, that's where other nationalities can be. They can either be like us and be right, or they can be different and be wrong. I'm dogmatic about that. You can treat a white individual well because they treated you well. That's fair. But you start treating their society like they're respect worthy and not blameworthy, and you're a damn sellout. Whether you're ADOS or from the continent or from the Caribbean or from the Middle East. You start looking at their society like, oh, they're just okay. You want to know how I learned this? I've been talking to y'all about this for years, for months. I've been here 9 years. I've had no inroads. One, I didn't meet very many black citizens. Two, they didn't open up to me. And I noticed, after a while, I began to notice this because I really didn't want to hear what anybody else had to say about what it was like to be living here and from here until I heard from the black folks first. And I didn't get to. I wasn't allowed. They weren't mean, but you know what? They didn't take me to their weddings. They didn't bring me into their homes. And I began to realize that they may not have trusted me. And my ex-wife told me something, and I thought, well, maybe it was just coming from an American black woman's perspective. And it turns out she was right. They have learned not to be mean, but they have learned to make friends with non-black folks very sparingly, very carefully. And they saw me as one. It was a lack of trust. Absolutely it was. And this is also what I was seeing on Hajj. Now I understand why it was that some of the security guards at Hajj, they gave me the head nod and raised their eyebrows when they saw me, because they saw me with my wife and they heard me talking. But some of the other black folks, whether they were citizens or not, they weren't that way. They were not welcoming and opening up. One of them turned out to be from a tribe that makes up a significant proportion of my mother's ancestry, a Malian, from the Bambara tribe. Didn't want to talk at all until his phone didn't work. And I was able to use my Spanish to read the French to see what the options were and unlock his phone. I was okay then. And the thing was, I wasn't trying to bother the man and get anything from him, really. Most I tried to do was make enough peace with the man to politely tell him, bro, your snoring is a damn problem. You're waking everybody up. That's the most that I wanted. But when it came to Hajj, he was divisive. He was the only recognizably black person in the room. He didn't know that there was another one in the room. And in the same group, as they would call it, the Hamla, he didn't know that there was another one because he wasn't going to open up. And I can't blame him. Somewhere down the line, he had learned that he was going to be shut out. And the thing is, it's not even because of danger or violence here. That I told you they're not dangerous, they're not violent. It is simply here because of just the assumption of white normality and black abnormality and deformity. Just that assumption on a very subconscious level, which you can get from watching TV, was enough. Does that sound familiar? While we're trying to get representation on cartoons and our enemies' media, looking to them to represent us positively in their media against their own interest. Does that sound familiar? Because of what happens at a very subconscious and deep level when kids grow up and see the absence of that. Yeah, same thing, same struggle, same concerns. You got different levels, the same diversity of reaction to racism that you got in the States and in the Caribbean and in the continent is the same diversity of reactions you got here in the Gulf amongst black Gulf citizens. Not only amongst non-citizens that moved here, but amongst the black citizens too. You got the ones with the inferiority complex. Very conservative and very right-wing thinking. And don't talk to them about that black stuff because we're all Muslim. Yeah, okay. They don't even want me to advocate for them. And probably think I'm crazy for being so happy to be black, even though that's how Allah made me, and I should be happy with it. And you see them, and then you start meeting some of the non-black citizens that actually are more humanizing of Africans and actually know something about the history of the Hausa and the Soninke people in the Mali empires. And you're like, wait a minute, so you're going to let this guy over here be happier for you to be black than you ought to be black yourself. Damn, man. Yeah, you have that kind of inferiority complex. And then you've got those that are kind of in the middle. A lot of them actually fall somewhere in the middle. They're not really sure what to make of it. They're just trying to be good people. And they're just trying to defend themselves from too much harm from the biases of others, even the ones that don't mean them any harm. And then you got the ones that react against it and get militant and aggressive. And they say, you know what, shuck this fit. One of the things that they never do is they never blame Allah. And they never blame his religion, Islam, for what some Bedouin Arabs do, whether they got inferiority complex or whether they are aggressively against it. That's one thing they don't do. That is unique. Not even in the continent, where that's spreading in the continent now, but that actually is a very unique idea that started in the diaspora on the western side of the Atlantic. And what was the reason for that? Because somebody knew that there were actual solutions inherent in the faith itself, such as the fact that when you correct someone for their biases and they refuse to even admit they're wrong, you have grounds to call them a blaspheming disbeliever, not because they have the biases and if they admit they got the bias and they need to get over it, because that's a human weakness. But when they start trying to justify it, no. Such as the belief that if you actually mistreat someone, even in word, you give them your good deeds and you take their bad deeds. So what this means is that, and this is an Islamic idea, when you mistreat someone on an individual or on a mass scale, mistreatment is mistreatment, you make them superior to you by virtue of your mistreatment of them, by virtue of your oppression of them. They are now better than you. There is no more equality. You treated them as less than equal. You made them superior in the eyes of God. We have that in Islam. You don't have that in Christianity. When I said that there were solutions in this, there was a reason I said it. I just asked you all to look them up and see them for yourself. But I wanted you all to understand, too, that that it is actually a very liberating experience to reach out to others of our same strand when we meet them and give them a chance and allow them to tell their story as well, because there are a lot of commonalities. And this is something that more of us should have done, because for me to do this so readily, despite the fact that I'm not always recognizable, despite the fact that the criteria to be considered black here is different from over there, back in the Americas. Despite that, it's too ironic. It's too backwards. If you come over here, you have the capacity to do that and find out better even than I did. It took me 9 years and an accident in a coincidence meeting to be able to start to learn what I'm learning now. It could have taken you all 9 hours. Most of you coming here, you could have learned this in 9 hours. It's taken me 9 years to confirm. Some of it I suspected, but to be able to confirm. My ex-wife was right about this. I didn't know it. I had no reason to assume she would be right. Because I wouldn't say that she's completely a colorism crybaby, but she was on some of the same assumptions as the colorism crybabies. And now I can honestly say that, nope, she was on to something. She didn't make this up. She was on to something. Yeah, actually, yes, a lot of them did not trust me. They weren't mean to me. They weren't rude, but they did not trust me. They trust those who they know from childhood. Those are their friends, if they're not recognizably black, visibly black. And yes, this has led to a feeling of isolation here. It wasn't because I had anything against those who were not black and actually welcomed me. I had nothing against them if they welcomed me and they were serious. And it wasn't just because I'm American. And a lot of them didn't welcome me just because I'm an American. It had a lot to do with me being a muhajir. But yeah, on the flip side, yes, there were those. Absolutely. There were those. And many of them actually, who casually called us slaves, not even meaning any harm, but just so casually doing it, as stupid as that was, and thinking that we weren't supposed to be upset about it. Having these same assumptions as ignorant white folks in the Americas. I'm not racist, but you sound just like a white American. You're just speaking a different language, or you have a different accent in English when you say it. Or like when I said, okay, so why are you so against intermarriage then? I know my reasons, but what are yours? Well, to protect the white race. When you see someone that's not counted as black, but is darker than you, saying something like that, and saying that by race they're white, just speaking in a biological sense, saying that can make you paranoid. I understand the phenomenon of blackonoia, even though it's not always right. I know where it comes from. I understand how we can make these assumptions that we make, that everyone that's not us is an enemy. I get that. My question is, what do black folks say about this? I've learned more from non-black sympathizers in this country. Up until about 5 weeks ago, I had learned more from non-black sympathizers in this country and from this country than I had from any of us. Then I finally get to meet some of us, and I'm hearing some very similar things. And one of the things I was hearing was, yeah, man, this is the west side of Riyadh, saying it in English with that W hand sign. Finding out that one of their favorite sports is basketball here. It's not just soccer, but a lot of us like soccer and basketball. Finding out that, yeah, sometimes brothers get harassed by the women here. Finding out about things like this. Finding out that there have been situations in which the police here will single them out. But those are usually corrupt cops that'll do other things to anybody at all, but at times singling out black folk. Finding out that they faced some similar things, and that's why they had sympathy for George Floyd. A lot of them simply didn't come out in the forefront and say a whole lot about it for one reason. They were standing back to see because they didn't know how much they were going to be allowed to speak until white Saudis began to express sympathy for George Floyd. Yeah, if they are openly too pro-black, they could lose positions and jobs. And those who will be in a part of locking them out of jobs and livelihood would be those who count themselves as not racist. Well, I'm not racist, but you talk about race too much. You see what I'm saying? They live in an environment that would be quicker would be quicker and will be quicker to correct them for being too militant against racism than it would be to correct a paler skinned bronze heir for racism. Although it is improving. Does this not sound like something you've heard before? How would you know if you're not willing to reach out? I told you all, FBA is a necessary distinction, just as is Jamaican, Bajan, Bahamian. Not only African, but Cameroonian, Ghanaian, Conakry-Bissau, Malian, Sierra Leonean. These are necessary distinctions. Distinctions, not divisions. And if you lose sight of that balance, while we're having these debates with each other to sort out the things that we do need to sort out. If we lose sight of that balance, we are going to miss out on valuable information from each other, because what I've learned actually can prove. I don't have proof that anybody told me this, but when you hear what I've heard from just listening to people, you will then know, even if you don't have copies of the proof, you will know that there is a conspiracy against black people, and it's international. And you would wonder what the hell it's about. Well, the only way you're going to know why anybody would even have a motive to do that is if you study Islam. But that's another story for another day. What I wanted you to understand is that we got to remember that balance. Distinctions are normal and necessary. Divisions for us they're not only not necessary, they are unaffordable. And there's so much information that you're not going to learn if you're willing to sit up and maintain that. And it is funny that in the age of not only increased communications between people, but increases in communications between black folks and increases in black folks accepting Islam, which does put a lot of us in communication with each other, that all of a sudden Yvette Cornell jumps up, and whether she made this up or not herself, she jumps up and gets traction when she says ADOS. And it goes beyond simply specifying reparations, but it's her saying it. The irony is not lost on me. Yeah, valid point. Reparations is due in different ways to different nationalities of us. Absolutely, that is true. However, how does it brought up by someone that is doing something that every other nationality of black folks naturally and historically is found to be an abomination? We need to be different from them. Yeah, you just don't. You want to say that because you're sick and tired of hearing them talk about you carpet munching with one of Master's granddaughters on top of that. That's what that's about. Let's call it what it is. And I'm not willing to sit up here and get into an unaffordable division and argument and debate against relatives that have not harmed us and have been harmed by some of the same people. All because one mayor wanted to practice what we have naturally seen as an abomination. And it must be an abomination because look what it's doing. And look how supported it is. Maybe for the next one, I'm thinking, but maybe for the next one I'll record on why and how it is that Arabs hate black people. Because somebody talked about that. A TikToker talked about that. Well, some of us have been done wrong by black people. Maybe I'll talk about that next. I'll leave it up to you. You can say in the comments whether that would be relevant or not. But I'm going to say this, though, because what does it have to do with the black manosphere? Well, we black men, we're looking at different places, honestly, different places in which we can afford to start families and have legacies that aren't going to harm us. There is something to be said for that. There's something important about that. Do you know what it is? Simply put, there are people in this Gulf region, especially if you're Muslim, there are people in this Gulf region that actually learn from us gladly with no hatred for us. None. And to the men, there are people here that are us and love us. And if you're looking to be able to have a marriage and a stable family situation that is sustainable, this is actually another place to look. If you're black and you're Muslim, they're roughly 10% of the population in Saudi. Saudi citizens, I think about 24 million, maybe 27. So about 2 million here. How many of us are Muslim and male amongst diasporan black men? Probably about 2 million. Maybe more than that even. You may be able to kill two birds with one stone. Hijrah and marriage. It's a possibility. But how would you know if you're going to let somebody like that carpet munching mayor in Chicago practicing an abomination tell you how you're supposed to feel about black folks from other nationalities when their attitudes towards us are very diverse and very few of them have any hatred for us? I hope this has been a benefit. Thanks for listening. As always, black heart, black mind, black out, assalamu alaikum, black heterosexual, non-select male power just because they don't like it, and black patriarchy till black patriarchy, not based on a nationality, black patriarchy until extinction or judgment day. We here at Jet Black Airways, thank you for flying again with us, where jet black is also a verb. Keep jetting black with us till the wings and the wheels fall off. Justice demands that we admit to distinctions and understand them without creating unnecessary divisions. Justice demands that we have some uncomfortable conversations with each other, not where non-black folks can listen and jump in, but in order to fix things, because we need a necessary cooperation, as opposed to just being divisive and saying, you stay over there, F you ain't one of us. And in the name of this unity, we cannot sit up here and just ignore certain distinctions that we have and legitimate grievances between ourselves either. Both of them are extremes. That balances the distinction without the division, as I have stated. That balances justice. Justice forever.